Welcome to the Crosscheck, the squawk sheet that uncovers stories, challenges, and careers shaping business aviation today. I'm your host, Neil Capano. In a stunning turn of events, I've taken over this podcast, and I'm here interviewing Rob Hoffman and Ian Lump as they celebrate their 15th episode. So, let's dive right in. Rob and Ian, welcome to your show.
This is very confusing right now. I feel like we're in bizarro world. But Neil, you were our first guest, correct? If I'm not mistaken. I think Ian and I did our one solo show. We had you on. You kind of really helped break in the podcast here. So thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks. But other than being slightly awkward, and that's me anyways, I appreciate you taking this opportunity to grill us a little bit.
Well, Ian, before we even dive into this right now, and I love the self-deprecating humor here, but you are a master networker. You have your own networking group, and it was your idea to start this podcast over here. I'm just curious, and Neil, I'm sorry, I don't want to steal your thunder right now, but I'm going to just pop in and ask Ian a question right now. How do you feel this has helped you as far as with your public speaking and your networking abilities and whatnot? It is different when you're sitting here behind a microphone, right, and on the hot seat. What's your perspective on this show and how that's kind of helped you with your networking in this industry as well?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is this can be edited.
Yes.
So any of my flubs or missteps can be deleted pretty easily. I've been on the stage speaking and in Q&A sessions off and on for the last 5 years, but I have gotten more people coming up to me at events or in my networking group or on social media to talk about this than I did any of my other speaking engagements. So I know from that perspective, it has definitely helped, but just me trying to fine tune the words that come out of my mouth and be less awkward. This has been fantastic. Plus it's just a fun way to engage with new people, old people, and everyone in between. So it helps keep me a little bit more on the pulse, and I'm happy to keep doing it.
One thing that I've always found is I'm very jealous of people that have very specific, non-generalized qualities. There's a very underrated ability that a lot of people have that I don't possess, and that is quick thinking behind slow speech. And I feel like that's kind of the mantra in podcasts. Like you do need to think it out, but at the same time, it can be fast. So I think both of you guys have that ability, and I'm excited to ask you guys the questions so you guys can consider what's important and what's not.
All right, Neil, go for it.
Yeah. So at the end of the day here, here's how we're going to do it today. I've got 4 quick segments planned, 2 questions each to keep things moving along. First up, we're going to talk about your audience. Who's been listening and engaging with the show? Then we'll dive right into the guests you've had on over these past 15 episodes. After that, I want to learn more about you two and what this journey has been like. And finally, we'll wrap up with some predictions. Where you see the show going and the industry heading. Does that sound okay with you guys?
Sounds exciting. Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So
turn it off.
Let's start off strong. First question. What has surprised you guys most about your listeners?
I think I'd like to answer this one first because a reminder, obviously everyone knows, as we just discussed here, that, Ian is knee deep in this community and he's been living BizAv for his entire career while I have not. I'm a private pilot, obsessed with aviation, had a few roles at some aviation tangential companies in my career in the past. I worked for a ride-hail, a general aviation ride-hail service, on-demand ride-hail service called Fly Auto. That led me to Flying Digital Media Group, where I had a short stint over there as managing editor and as a video producer. And that's really where I discovered business aviation, very well aware of it, but I really started taking a peek underneath the hood. Went to NBAA base down in Orlando, I believe. Ian, I believe that's where we actually met for the first time in real life.
Yeah, the last Orlando show too.
Yeah.
We broke it. It was our
fault. I had a good time there, and it was a neat, and I apologize to everyone if we helped break it. But we launched a show for Flying Digital Media called Business Air TV, which was kind of predicated on an old school streaming cable show model. It wasn't optimized for social media, and it failed, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot about business aviation. I became really intrigued by it. And when Ian reached back out to me, about 6 months ago or so and said, hey, I was already podcasting about EVs. Hey, maybe we could do something like this for business aviation. I'm like, you know what? I love this idea. Let's develop it further. And here we are. Getting back to your question, Neil, what has amazed me about business aviation is that it is this small, tiny community. As Ian loves to say, it's a niche within a niche within a niche. So he's absolutely right about that. There's no question about it. It's this, in commercial aviation, it's this small percentage of business that's in the Part 135, Part 91 space. But what's amazing is the community and the people that work here. And this is the reason why Ian is so big on networking. Everyone's got this amazing personality. Everyone wants to connect. Everyone wants to mentor, to pull people up. Everyone's rooting for everyone else to succeed in this business. And let me tell you, coming from the creative world, from television, post-production, production, where I used to work, such a cutthroat business where most people just want to step on your head to get ahead, just to climb over you. And here it's the exact opposite. And it has that family kind of feel where as long as you've got a good personality and you're sociable and you got a good head on your shoulders, the path to success is there because everyone supports each other. So that's the thing that really impressed me the most about business aviation. And really, in the end, that's really what I learned most about this podcast with all the guests that we've invited on.
Yeah, to kind of spin off of what you're talking about, there are two things I want to mention. Number one, before it slips my brain, Business Air TV felt like Motor Week for aviation.
Yeah,
If
sure.
you know what I'm talking about, right? And I grew up watching that, so
Me
like
too.
seeing it, I was like, this is awesome. I love it. And Business Air was like my baby and my brand that I had brought into Flying Media when they acquired us. So to see that take that next step was great. But you're right. There were some things that, maybe it just wasn't optimized for what people needed at that time. And now we can kind of provide that in a different way now with
Yes.
the podcast. I'm happy that we've come full circle on that. But outside of that, and to answer your question, Neil, the audience and the people listening to us, watching us, hopefully seeing this right now. Obviously, everyone's in business aviation for the most part. I did have a friend of mine who's a postal worker that said he listens to me on his route sometimes, has no business aviation, anything, but because he knows me and saw, I don't know, through Instagram or whatever, he's like, yeah, I've listened to your podcast. I was like, oh, well, that's great. What do you think about it? But the only one outside of this industry that I know of that's listened to it, besides my son, my youngest apparently does a pretty good job pissing off his mom when he's at her house because he'll find me on YouTube and watch our podcasts or shorts or whatever. I hope because he misses dear old dad, but also just kind of a fun little like throwback that more people than just this bubble do see these things, and that's good to know too. So if there's anyone else out there that is watching this that doesn't know what business aviation is and you want to know more, please reach out, let me know. I'm happy to help. But love our audience. We've continued to grow. I'm definitely getting deeper into this than I thought I would, but judging by the amount of people engaged on LinkedIn, it's definitely kind of a who's list of people that are interested in knowing more and learning more and growing in business aviation. So that's exciting because that's what I was hoping we'd go for.
This is definitely where I understand. Obviously, the target market here is business aviation, but right out of the get-go, Ian, you told me I want this to be about leadership and mentorship and networking. And I think that's applicable across all verticals, right? You don't necessarily have to be in business aviation to want to learn how to grow or basically hear stories of how it's done. So I think a lot of the leaders that we bring onto the show are sharing some intel, which is applicable way beyond aviation itself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Ian, other than your ex-wife, what kind of feedback are you getting from the industry at large? How are people responding? What are people telling you that they want?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing early on, I heard from an industry colleague, that the time frame that we were hitting, 25-ish minutes was perfect for his commute.
I think also what I want to second is, listen, duration is one thing, right? We try to basically structure this show so it's just enough to keep your attention, keep you entertained, and not so much that it feels like it's a job to listen to all 1, 2, 3 hours. There's some podcasts, even aviation ones, not necessarily business aviation ones, that I've listened to over the years, where I just see a duration of 2.5 hours. I'm like, I don't think I'm prepared to sit through that right now. Of course, you can break it up, but there's something psychological for me where it's like, I just want to know there's an ending, there's an off ramp here. So, yes, we have definitely structured in a manner that we feel is the right time. And Neil, before we started recording, you told me, and I told you I welcome your transparency. You're like, I think some may have been a little too long, some may have been a little too short, and we definitely want to hit the just right. And what was it? The way you said that some podcast could have been an email, and something about this email could have been a fight. I'm going to steal that line. Please remind me again so I have it officially documented here.
Yeah. I mean, there are some podcasts that should have been emails, and I'm sure there's some emails that could have just been fist fights. We don't need 5 hours of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. We've tried to take a unique angle here. And like I said, it circles back to Ian's concept. And this is what really kind of the light bulb popped over my head when he said it was mentorship, leadership, networking, how to kind of get ahead in this industry. Because I do feel that the updates, the news is covered pretty well. I believe that your former platform, Neil, if we want to talk about it.
Yeah, so I was running a SMS platform called AvBuzz, and I described it as a contextual intelligence network. Getting the little bite-sized pieces of information out to the people that needed them. But there's more and more studies from Bain, there's a lot of statistics going on there about the evolution of the internet. And the fact of the matter is that people aren't clicking links anymore. And if traditional media is still dependent on links being clicked and advertising revenue based on that kind of search parameters, Google is changing that. Their AI is eating away at that. And the recent Bain study from, I think it was February, showed that 60% of adults in the United States no longer click on links. They just read the headline. Right? So we have to take a look at that and figure out exactly what that means going forward. And if we just merely want to provide the upfront information, that's all well and good. But that's also not a 2-hour long expose on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So, and I think that kind of boils down a little bit more into kind of our next segment here, which is about guests, right? We have to be able to understand our audience to the point where we can give them the information that they want in the form that they want. So I have to ask both of you guys, who is a dream guest other than me, clearly?
I have my list. And I mean, when I left Flying Magazine 3 years ago or whatever it was, I started compiling names of people because this is something that's been a long-term goal of mine. My dream guests, if I had to pick one person, and I'm going to say in the business aviation space that I would love to interview, we can no longer interview because we lost him earlier this year. And, that would be Kevin Lacey, formerly of Airplane Repo, started a youth aviation group at his home airport to get kids involved and give them something to do, put a wrench in their hand, flight time, in their pocket, and something to build off of. Spent a lot of time with him over the years when I was with former companies that saw that develop and watched him grow this into something that's amazing to get people into general and business aviation in a positive way, more so than watching the Discovery Channel and seeing him jump into an airplane that isn't his and take off into the sky. But he's got a lot of stories to tell, and I've heard a lot of them over a beer at Oshkosh, but unfortunately he is gone now. Maybe someone adjacent to him, or I know we've got something coming up here. I won't tease too much. That will be a really good interview as well, with a pretty well-known pilot that I think will give us all something to gnaw on and enjoy too. So more to come on that.
Yeah, and I would say, but really one of the guys who from the moment Ian and I, kind of the genesis of the show, and we figured we were going to do it, we got him on the show already. So my dream guest has already arrived, and that is or was Andrew Schmertz, who we had on the show several months ago. Andrew is the founder of Hopscotch Air. When I was working at FlyAuto, the on-demand mobility service, like Hopscotch Air was sort of like the model of how it was done right. And I also pre-show, I was discussing with Neil how from a general aviation standpoint, living in New York City is maybe the worst area in the world to do that, right? Just so much congestion, the urban environment, suburban environment. There are very few options. They do operate out of KFRG, that's in Farmingdale, Long Island, where I trained. They're really doing most of their business these days out of Westchester, but they do a lot of stuff to connect the Northeast, and they use general aviation. They use Cirrus airplanes. That's what they specialize in, which is really unusual for 135 operations. And I just loved his business model and how he was doing it. And the whole path to eVTOL, I feel, is sort of predicated on this urban regional travel. And he was the guy that I really wanted to speak to. I would say that Kyle Clark from Beta Technologies, maybe I would say he's the holy grail right now of someone who I'd love to have on the show, because I do believe that eVTOL is the future. Between Joby, between Archer, between Beta, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. There's going to be more consolidation, there'll be more failures, but this is where the future lies. And so, yeah, having one of those players on the show, yeah, that would be my my wish list come true.
So hopefully Kyle or somebody that knows Kyle's listening, and you can throw us a bone, because that would be a fantastic episode, right? But no, I think it's a good goal, right?
I have his PR team on speed dial. I can make that call.
Dude, that'd be a really nice call. All right. So fingers crossed on this one, Neil.
Yeah. So you've had 15 guests so far. And obviously, there's a lot of things that people talk about on air. There's also a lot of things that people talk to you about in advance of the show or after the show. What's the best piece of advice that a guest has given you? Or what's something that's ended up being super valuable to you, even if it wasn't at the time?
I would say that Joe Peebles, and Ian was kind of teeing him up. He's like, oh, I got Joe Peebles on the line. He's going to come on the show. And he was very busy and kind of got delayed a few weeks. And Joe Peebles delivered. His backstory of being a door gunner, an A&P in the military, it really resonated. It went and Hire Vets, which is his organization, is not for profit, to help vets, find work, particularly in business aviation, but beyond as well. He's the guy that really kind of blew me. We have had a lot of impressive guests so far, but Joe in particular is so earnest and honest. And he was basically on leave and came back just late enough to miss out on a mission. And the door gunner on that mission, who he said he did not treat well, that helicopter was lost, and everyone on board perished. And he struggles with that this person, the immaturity of Joe when he was a younger man, to not treat people fairly and to not really see the big picture. And that's really haunts him to this day and has changed him, which is really kind of amazing how he's kind of turned this thing, which he beats himself up probably unnecessarily for this, how he's turned into something for good to help others. It really moved me. It really brought me to tears as we were having this podcast. I'm like, I didn't think this podcast was going in that direction. That's not what I thought this was about. And so, yeah, I'll say, Joe, if you're listening right now, your show was really one that moved the needle for me.
Yeah, we should probably link it in the show notes, because that was one we talked about earlier. Like, some episodes could have been longer, some could have been shorter. We could have talked, and
that one could have kept going. That one should have been longer.
3 hours of Joe Peebles. So yeah, that's another one that I'd love to come back to and revisit. So maybe we'll have a Joe Peebles 2.0, similar to having Neil back in here today. But best advice for me off air, I would say. So I love the conversations that we have. There's a lot of things after we cut recording where it's like, man, I wish we still had the camera on at that point, because we've had a lot of real good conversations with people once you get to know them after, 45 minutes of talking back and forth, right?
So post show, I tend to keep recording now, because Ian is absolutely correct. Some of the best conversations are quote unquote off air, but it's when the pressure of the podcast is no longer there, when you don't feel like, all right, we've got to kind of deliver this in a certain amount of time. I got to make my answers correct. I got to ask the right questions. We got to cover these topics. Check. So you're going by an agenda and an outline. And then at the end of the show, all right, that was great. Thanks for having, this was fantastic having you here. This was a lot of fun. Oh yeah, something we talked about earlier on the podcast. And then we just start kind of going on this tangent or this segue. And we've had some fantastic conversations after the fact, as Ian had mentioned.
Some of the after hours stuff.
Yes.
That's great. I know that. I think just the general, pat on the back of I'm proud of you doing this. This is fantastic. Keep going is the one thing that I've heard over and over again from some of our guests after the fact that make me feel good about doing this.
Well, we've definitely had some terrific, nurturing people on this podcast who've really helped many. And you can also even tell, Ian, when we post this on LinkedIn, the sort of feedback that you get from their connections, it just speaks volumes because these are some of these leaders that we've brought on have touched so many people and supported them and mentored them. And they're the ones that are chiming in. And Jamie Munoz comes to mind, Kat Wren as well. They really brought something to the table here where you just know that they've worked in these FBOs. And you love to hear it's not just the mentorship and leadership. They both come from these incredibly healthy environments where they don't have a lot of turnover because it's not a toxic environment. You all work in a very high pressure industry. And it's very easy, no matter what vertical you're in, when you're under the pressure for things to get toxic. And they have shown us the blueprint of how to do things right. So yeah, I would say those two really impressed. By the way, Jennifer Pickerel, also of API, she was amazing. I have a background in recruiting. It was creative. Had nothing to do with aviation, but recruiting is still recruiting, and there's a whole psychology behind that as well. And she also shared with us some fantastic insight of what makes a working environment a good one or a bad one. And from her perspective, she really offered us some incredible insight as well.
Yeah, I mean, before we move on from guests too, I just want to note that from what I've seen, because I'm plugged into social media pretty indefinitely, for better or for worse, right? But the engagement through LinkedIn specifically that we got from Kat and from Zach Ungerleider, was through the roof. And the feedback I got from people outside of social media too on those two episodes especially was phenomenal. So obviously the stories that they shared about their personal growth and what they've learned over the years, and both kind of coming from outside of the industry perspectives to then falling in love with and sticking to BizAv, I think a lot of people can relate to. So hopefully that helps, and obviously continues to grow for them, but also for our show, the viewership through their networks. So two real good friends of mine. Glad we had them on the show, but man, didn't expect it to be that big.
It's interesting, Ian, because you're talking about LinkedIn, and Neil, you would also mention that people don't click on links and whatnot. And it's the podcast. There's a lot of growth in the podcast space. There are a lot of players in here as well. It's getting very crowded, very saturated, right? So you still have to kind of make your mark somehow or the other. But there's a reason why it's growing, because there's an entertainment component to it as well. And that's where I kind of circle back to LinkedIn, which is, it's a social media platform, right? It's a professional one, but it's still social media. And I do believe that a lot of times people, whether they're procrastinating or just having fun and taking a break, are on there for more than just purely business, although business can be entertaining. I personally really enjoy reading and listening to business content. It's like a hobby of mine, which I guess why I'm podcasting right now. But I do realize that you're getting more and more eyeballs through LinkedIn than I ever anticipated before. And I think particularly for our show, it seems to be it's a natural home. So, we're going to continue to post content over there and hopefully continue to grow our audience there and actually on the podcast themselves. And obviously whenever we post little snippets, highlights of the show, bite size, just like someone reading the headline only. If it's streaming and you don't have to click on anything and the clip is a minute long, people can get behind that. Maybe I've had so many people have reached out to me like, oh, I follow your show. And they bring up the guests that were on the show, but they haven't actually listened to many episodes, if any. They're like, well, I follow you on LinkedIn and you give me a blurb and you have the short video and, I get enough for the time that I have. So it's interesting. I think our media landscape continues to evolve, but LinkedIn is definitely going to continue to be our primary space of discovery.
Reels are huge these days, and having those quick short videos are a fantastic way to grow your audience, but it doesn't always translate to more people actually listening to the whole.
Although interestingly, Ian, the one place where we're performing well is on the YouTube Reels. The Instagram Shorts, not so much, but for some reason, people seem to love clicking on the Reels. So we will continue to post there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, my Instagram algorithm is mostly just cat videos. So, you guys barely even show up.
Neil, same with me, by the way, just for the record.
I think that one thing that makes this medium actually really exciting is that, there are, shows as old as time, right? Back when, video, CNN Crossfire is a great example, right? It was a great show for as long as they had it because they did a head to head, right? It wasn't just a bunch of talking heads. It wasn't just people in a studio in New York City or Los Angeles. And, because of that, I think that there's conflict is useful, right? We don't have to always agree on everything. So for this start of our next segment, I want to know what is something that you two disagree about. And go.
Oh boy, yeah. Ian, do we disagree on anything? I mean, it's a bromance over here, man. I don't know,
Well,
man. I think we're still in the honeymoon phase.
Yeah, we're still honeymooning, except for that ugly green helmet behind you.
You
Although
had to go there,
you
huh?
got my quarterback now, so I am going to be kind of a pseudo Jets fan this year, just to see how Justin Fields does. But I don't know. It's probably one of the only things I think we could legitimately disagree on.
For those listening at home and not on the video feed here, yeah, I have a New York Jets helmet. I'm a long suffering in the background here. I'm a long suffering New York Jets fan, but you're a Bears fan, right, Ian? So
I've
I
been
mean, go from
suffering
bad to worse.
just as long, if not more. Yeah.
At least you've won a Super Bowl within the last 3 decades, or is it 4 decades now?
I have not witnessed
Were you not
winning
on this
Super
planet?
Bowl. I was born. I am a Super Bowl baby. They have this like thing where in celebration, more kids are born 9 or 10 months after the fact. I was one of those. So I missed out on the Super Bowl in '85.
You missed the whole the refrigerator, William the Refrigerator Perry, and the Icky Shuffle. You missed all of that, huh?
But that's probably why it's like ingrained into me. I was born with that blue and orange spoon in my mouth, I suppose, because when they won it, I don't know, was it January or February, whatever, in '86, technically. Here I come December later that year, and it's like, okay, this makes more sense now. Why I am in love with the Chicago Bears, even though we have sucked for I'm going to be 39 this year, so basically 39 years, short of a couple of hot spots here and there, but it's still, yeah. I have my kids to suffer along with me now.
Yeah, when my son was born, one of his aunts bought him a Jets jersey, and I posted on social media, and the first comment was child abuse. So this is a tough place to be in. But yes, I have the helmet there, and I wear it with pride. And obviously, you do as well. You really should one up me and get a helmet for your background, so we can kind of continue this rivalry.
For football season.
Really a race to the bottom. But yeah, Neil, unfortunately, beyond football, I don't think there's a whole lot that me and Ian disagree on. He's a real nice guy. I don't know. Does anyone have a disagreement with you, Ian? I mean, I kind of almost find that hard to believe. But no, we're getting along just fine.
I mean, have you checked my DMs? No, I'm kidding. The Crosscheck podcast spinoff could just be Sports Yelling 2.0. I think that you guys would probably do pretty well with that.
Check.
Maybe you're right, though.
September for that. That'll be.
Neil, maybe a crossfire for business aviation is what this industry needs. Yeah, we're too warm and fuzzy over here, and maybe we need a little more conflict. So that's definitely one to put in the suggestion box.
I mean, maybe, yeah, again, a spinoff of this or something. Nobody else steal this idea, right? The 5 people that are going to listen to this episode, don't tell anybody. We're going to go ahead and probably make that happen. But if nothing else, sports cross-check. Just not the hockey version. That always pops up when I try and Google our podcast. I'm not as big into hockey, but I am a Blackhawks fan by nature. But anyway, getting far, far off topic.
If it does come to fisticuffs, let me know. We can meet in an alley in Seattle or something. I'm happy to oblige.
Neutral turf. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So a question for both you guys, now that we've all figured out that we all get along, right? So when you look at your resumes in 5 years, obviously this podcast is a part of your professional pedigree, but it's not the entirety of your professional pedigree in any way, shape, or form. How does the podcast fall in line with your priorities? And, what about the medium do you find really valuable, and how do you want to expand on that?
Well, Interesting that you should bring this up. I think the whole purpose of me starting this podcast was that I could hitch a ride on a G700 someday in conjunction with this. But in all seriousness, I am a video producer by trade. I've had forays and I've pivoted a lot over my career, but in the end, that's still I'm a creative. I've been video production, post production, marketing. I did have like I mentioned before, it was a recruiter. I had my own staffing agency for creatives at one point. That led me to Flying Digital Media and then back into the world of being a producer again. So here I am today, right now. And business was a little slow as a freelancer last year. And that's where I kind of founded the Urban EV podcast because I'm also kind of really big into sustainable green energy and EVs and technology in general. So I started one about EVs. Then that kind of led us here to the cross check. The goal is to continue to grow these shows. And the good news is that one of my colleagues from Flying, Michael Wilds, who is an incredible business aviation reporter, reached out to me. He had started a media agency called Massive and Crew. He reached out to me several months ago and said, "Hey, I need a producer over here. We're starting to grow." So I am working with Massive and Crew producing content for other podcasters now as well. So yeah, I want to continue in this space. Broadcast television, where I really got my start, has been decimated right now. AI has, the one good news about business aviation is more or less AI is a tool that's going to enhance business aviation while it has the potential to be a job creator. While in the creative space, it is absolutely a job destroyer. And that vertical has really just gotten decimated. So many of my colleagues been looking for work for years now, or they're extremely underemployed. Between AI, between the streaming service and the way we consume media, it's all really not worked in our benefit. But one of the few areas of growth, which I noticed, which also led me to podcasts, is podcasts. People do listen to podcasts now in our busy, decentralized digital lives. Podcasts are very accessible. And whether you're commuting in your car or on the train or just laying in bed, it's just a really easy, passive way to get information or be entertained. And another thing which I've discovered a lot of podcasts is social media points you to the podcast. That's a place where people are most engaged with these days. So whether you're consuming the snippets or consuming the whole podcast as a whole, I feel this is a growth area. And yes, this podcast has led me in that direction. And the goal here is to continue with the cross check and to continue to grow the audience here and see where it goes. I don't necessarily want to get into the weeds of monetization, but is a labor of love for Ian and myself. But it's already led me the work. So that has helped. So there's a biz dev aspect to it as well. Like I said, people have also hired me as a producer. Michael has and others have as well through my exposure to the show. But I love aviation. I'm passionate about it. And the more I can talk about it, that's my long-winded 5-year plan of why I'm here right now producing the show.
Well,
Yeah.
if this is a labor of love, I can tell you that you can just ignore my email with the invoice, but that's fine.
Oh yeah. The check's in the mail. No. So,
Touche.
yeah. The whole reason why I've wanted to do something like this for the last several years is just to have another avenue for me to stay connected with people and for people to see me. This helps elevate my brand. I am a salesperson that wears a lot of hats. At the end of the day, my day job is in business development, marketing, and I am here in an off kilter way to help get some eyeballs on me. People know who I am. And then if I call them asking them to buy something, they know who I am and feel a little bit more comfortable about that, right? So this kind of becomes a conduit to sales for my 9 to 5. Business Aviation Group and Aviation Property Network pay me to sell their products and market what they have to offer. And if more people know who Ian Lump is at the end of the day, that helps them too, right? And as I'm traveling less and less for a lot of different reasons, it's good to have another way for people in the world to see know, listen, get familiar with me, and for me to also interview and talk to new people that could maybe parlay into something else down the road for that as well. I'm a master networker. We've talked about that. This is my way to continue that network from a distance while still keeping myself relevant. But I'm by no means a spotlight person. I will hand all the credit over to somebody else if I can, but this does help me further that mission because that's how I get paid, right? I'm a commissioned salesperson most of the time. So recording this on my lunch hour and praying that Rob can put it together in his free time helps everything else kind of elevate without it being a 40-hour-a-week gig, right? And I would love for it to be, but I don't think it'll ever get to that point where we're going to be pulling hair out and turning gray from putting this thing together because it's fun and it's simple and it's something that people want. So,
Well, we're on to our fourth segment here, and that is predictions. So you guys have to commit to something, right? It's very important. So I'm going to ask you two predictions. First of all, what do you think is brewing in the industry that's going to happen before you get a chance to actually talk to a guest about?
You're talking about like right now.
Right. Well, between now and the next 15 episodes, when I come back and have to grill you all over again.
Ian, I'm going to throw to you on that because your hand is on the pulse of business aviation while mine is sort of I'm monitoring it from afar.
yeah, I mean, so my prediction in the business aviation space for the next how long did it take us to get this far? I don't know, 4 months. Hopefully ATC modernization, at least in some form. There's a lot of talk about it. It's already kind of in progress. There's money behind it. There's people behind it with power. Hopefully there's some first step into that space between now and then. If we want to go a little bit further out than 3 or 4 months, I would love to see eVTOLs actually make a difference in the A to B of business aviation, maybe not necessarily being your, final destination flight, but to get you to the regional airport or private aviation airport that will then put you on the Gulfstream or the King Air that takes you to where you're going so that you're not spending an hour in the car. You're spending 15 minutes in the sky to get your private aircraft that's then going to take you on to your final destination, right? But that's probably more like, 5 years out?
Yeah, I'm going to second Ian on that. This is really kind of more my area of expertise. I actually was just on the Helicast podcast with Halsey Scheider, and we talked in depth about eVTOL developments. That is something which I've been tracking much more closely over the years. It's such a weird sort of animal, eVTOLs, right? Because is it a helicopter or is it a plane? And obviously, it's a little of everything depending on the model that you're looking at right now. And, there's no question that in the business aviation world, the helicopter vertical is just kind of like its own entity. It's almost like they're just two separate worlds that live in parallel. But eVTOL is going to be the great unifier. As more vertiports open up, which will take time, and this is definitely not going to be a 15 episode type of thing. I think Ian's prediction there about 5 years is maybe in 5 years and possibly 10. First, the eVTOLs have to be established, working essentially taking passengers from very few finite amount of vertiports, which are probably going to be existing helipads, to the airport. That's where you're going to see them kind of prove themselves. Once that starts happening, yeah, I mean, listen, wherever you are, that last mile, it still can take you a long time to get there from whatever general aviation airport you're landing in to where you really need to be. Westchester and Teterboro are the two big GA airports in the area. Westchester's a commercial airport, but Teterboro is strictly 135 and 91 flights. But that's still half hour to an hour away with traffic from New York City, and there are helicopters that do connect passengers to the city here, but that is going to be the model. Once those helicopters, those Airbuses, Sikorskis, the common man cannot afford to fly in those things. But I think there's some space in the middle there with business aviation where there are still plenty of passengers who can't quite hire a helicopter on a regular basis, but still need to get to where they're going in a hurry. So that's where eVTOL is going to kind of fill in the blanks. And you're going to see a lot of that. And once they're a proven commodity and they're safe and they're comfortable, certification, that's a whole big thing as well. But Joby, Beta, Archer, they're close. They're going to be flying in Dubai. They're going to be flying in New York. You're going to start seeing more and more of them. And when they become mainstream and they interconnect that last mile with, with 135 travel, you're going to see a whole lot more of that.
So let's actually talk about that. Let's talk about infrastructure and let's talk about investment and talk about where people are actually putting money into this industry and where they should be using it. I mean, this is a relatively capital intensive set of businesses, right?
Big
A lot
time.
of it is flow through, but I mean, essentially, most CEOs in this industry and CEOs in general are capital allocators, right? They're determining where to invest in their own businesses to be able to get a better rate of return for their investors or for their ownership class or whatever the case may be, right? So you guys have talked to 15 guests ranging from aircraft sales to FBO managers, staffing, advocacy. Given what you've learned, what do you think is the most important thing that private aviation as an industry needs to invest in the next, I don't know, year? By the time, what should we be talking about is already in progress by the time base rolls around in Vegas in October?
Well, we're always talking about how they need to invest in the people that work in there, and that is certainly something that is missed. It's a theme that's repeated over and over again with all of our guests. As far as from a technology perspective or a strategy angle, once again, I'm going to defer to Ian on this one.
Yeah, I mean, other than the human infrastructure that we need to highly invest in, the network of vertiports for that part of it to ever really take off needs to start to kind of kick up between now and the next year. I think that safety obviously is always a hot topic, something that people need to invest more in. I would imagine, especially after the year that we've had in aviation as a whole. I know we haven't had a ton of general aviation or private aviation issues, but when planes are landing upside down or not landing at all, we need to take a look back at, what we can do differently. And my history with my past company in the safety management side of things leads me to believe that there's going to be a further investment in not just the SMS mandate, but more either predictive or AI enhanced something to allow us to do a better job before the plane leaves the ground to make sure that it makes it back to the ground and everyone deboards safely.
I mean, there's no question that efficiency through technology is something we'll continue to see. There's so many tech solutions that are out there right now, and managing an FBO, managing a fleet. This is constantly a challenge where I feel like technology can probably help the industry do better.
What I'll say before we close, and considering that I am the host of this podcast, gentlemen, I do want to make sure that it's noted that while we talk a lot about human capital and about attracting the right people and about bringing people in, being more inclusive, and making sure that the opportunities continue to present themselves to not only the right people, but a more diverse set of people, we also have to make sure that we're being better employers to our people, right? You can have an absolute great team, but if they're underpaid and overworked and generally have and a terrible non-sustainable business model, then that doesn't really do anything. Like, there are going to be plenty of people that will just move on back to the airlines, or they'll move on to do literally anything. So we do have to make sure that we're also investing in creating sustainable, long-term, inclusive businesses that actually support our people long-term, rather than just merely getting them in and quickly kicking them out because you walk into a conference room and you're like, oh, this isn't for me. So I try not to do that, but I've also been fired 5 times. So who the hell am I to say?
And Neil, sorry, just to interject, because you reminded me of what I was trying to bring up
Hell
before,
yeah.
and that's sustainability is also another big challenge that's been brought up on our podcast, and it's something that the industry needs to work on as a whole. Obviously, in the end, SAF and a whole host of other measures here it's not a quick, easy fix. Alternative fuel sources, hydrogen, what have you. It's a really, really long play. There is a bit of a marketing black eye that the industry has. The messaging, it's eternal, obviously, with the human assets that work in business aviation and business aviation as a whole, which I believe NBA AA does a good job at. But they have to continue kind of banging the drum of all the positive attributes that business aviation, jobs, what have you, life-saving measures brings to communities and why it's so important. And there is a sustainability angle where you can make arguments of why business jets are, when you start hearing these stories of how some celebrity traveled, repositioned a jet from here to there and burned, God knows how many, gallons of Jet A and the carbon footprint of 100 people to move that jet, for a 10-minute repositioning flight.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of stories that really do not help business
Well,
aviation.
I think we've been focusing way too much on moralizing private aircraft use, as opposed to the alternative, which is understanding that if Ian or I or Rob decided to lead the industry tomorrow, which I'm sure that there's a few folks that are probably like, yeah, that's awesome. At the end of the day, they're still going to continue to fly. And I think that kind of internal moralization and trying to justify every time a negative story comes out and trying to justify in that way, it's just not constructive. It doesn't understand the audience. The general public doesn't know the difference anyway. So what does it really matter? All we're doing is
They're
really
only
convincing
reading the
ourselves that
headlines
we're
and
doing okay.
commenting below anyway, so they're not going to know the meat and potatoes of what's really going on, right? That's where we're at with media.
Slide into those DMs, everybody.
Yeah.
Just at the Crosscheck Podcast, nowhere else though. Yeah. Okay. So in closing, you guys have been great sports. I have to ask one more question, and that is there anything that you guys would like to preview about your next 15 episodes? What's in the hopper? What's going on? And who's going to be a much better host than I ever will?
We've got a handful of guests coming up that are going to be absolutely rock stars you're not going to want to miss. Rob and I may or may not be blacklisted by the FBI after the last interview that we did. I hinted earlier that we're going to talk to a pilot who's definitely worthy of some sort of recognition, but I'm not going to say anything else about that. But just keep your eyes peeled for some really interesting guests coming up.
Well, we can name some names.
Hell yeah.
But Amy Grubb is from the FBI. She was a fascinating interview. She is a sort of efficiency expert and a public speaker. That was another one of those podcasts where I had no idea which direction it was going in, but it was a good one. I highly recommend tuning into Amy's podcast. Lauren Baum, who's a cabin attendant and a consultant, she really brought an interesting perspective to the show as well. We also spoke with Samir Rahmani, David Bertica. These are all great shows that are going to be coming up within the next month.
All right, that's awesome. So, Rob, Ian, thanks for letting me flip the script on you guys today. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And on behalf of the Crosscheck Network, I'm Neil Capano, signing off from Manchester, New Hampshire.